Well, hello, everybody. Happy Monday to you all. If you got a long weekend because of the holiday here in the United States, I hope you've been enjoying it. Regardless, I hope that the month of October is treating you well. The month of September was really interesting, and I've commented in the past how I've noticed if there's like kind of a slow news month, one month, the next month will be significantly busier. And August was kind of that way. It was kind of a snooze fest as far as the headlines are concerned. But in September, we had some really interesting stuff come up, and I'm looking forward to discussing all of that with you here today. So, thank you so much for joining me for the September newsroom analysis. If this is your first time here and you're wondering what this is, hi, my name is Beck Griffin. I have been moonlighting, well, more or less fully embodying now the life of an independent citizen journalist after I found out about some things 5.5 years ago that I thought deserved more attention than they were getting. And so I decided to be the attention that was getting got on those subjects. And 5.5 years later, here I am, still discussing it. And honestly, very happy to be doing it. And if you want to know what my work has looked like over those past few years, you can go to my channel and you can check out the content there. What we're going to be going over today will also give you a good idea of what I kind of work in, my arena and my area of focus, if you will. I am predominantly concerned with human rights, and particularly within a religious context, within a Catholic context, actually. Just because I grew up Catholic, so I know that world really well. My parents put a ton of emphasis on faith formation and catechesis, so I still have all of that information floating around in my head as an adult, and it has been quite useful when I have looked at situations like Opus Dei or the Legion of Christ and these other religious organizations that have kind of been put on the mainstream radar because of human rights abuses and alleged human rights abuses. It's helped me kind of look through all of that and apply a clear lens, because sometimes it can be difficult if you are an outsider to a religion to kind of understand it all and grasp the nuance and everything, and it's easy to sometimes make mistakes. And so I'm happy to be able to talk about something that I know a little bit more about, which is Catholicism, and specifically these organizations within Catholicism that actually have an outsized impact on our society, regardless of whether or not you are Catholic, which is why I think they are worth talking about. And then also because of those human rights abuses, I think that we need to be shining as bright a light on as possible on those issues. And so what we're going to be going over today are the news headlines that were delivered to my inbox over the past month. I saved them all to a folder, the ones that I thought were relevant to my research or that I thought would be interesting to discuss. And we're going to spend some time in this live stream going over these news headlines. I'm going to read, I am going to opine, I am going to speculate. Nothing that I say here should be taken as a fact. Please do your own research, do your own fact checking, ask your own questions. The goal of this is to have a conversation about some recent past events, current events, to create a little bit of an archive of what is happening around us, because living in a 24-hour news cycle, I feel like we can lose track of what is happening really easily, and kind of lose the finer points and just the chaos of it all. So this is a chance to kind of hone in on some of those points that I think are important, create a little bit of an archive and a record, and also hopefully educate a little bit, pique your curiosity about some things, and maybe it'll encourage you to ask some questions in your own life and do some of your own research about some of the things that maybe you would like to know more about. So I am all for you guys sounding off in the chat. Please let me know where you're from, where you're tuning in from, how your day has been going, and I'll be checking back in as we go along. Please let me know your thoughts on these articles and on the topics that we're going to be going over. This is not a purely North American news analysis. We are going to be looking at news articles from around the world, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see what's going on. It's always interesting to realize that what's happening here is really not so different from what's happening in other places in the world. And I think it's good to kind of step back and look at the forest for the trees a little bit. So, with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and get into this first article here. We do have a nice chunk of articles to get through, so I am going to be moving a little bit quickly at times, but I think it'll be all good. And if there's something that you want to get a closer look at, because I just read through it a little bit too quickly, you can go and access that down in the description of this live stream. I have a source document with all of these news articles linked, so you can go back and reference them, read through them at your own pace, do whatever you want with them, share them, all that good stuff. So this first article, this was published at the beginning of last month, September 1st, the Ila course between Castellar and Asanya. Full disclosure, I'm going to be doing my damnedest to pronounce everything correctly, but I'm sure I'm not going to nail it all, so please don't eviscerate me too much if I don't get something perfect. This is a first reading for the most part, particularly aloud for me, so if I don't get everything perfect, it's a live stream. If you want perfection, show up to a regularly scheduled episode. So this was written by Xavier Salvador. Like I said, it was published September 1st, updated September 1st. Quote, "To govern is not to command but to foresee," wrote Emilio Castellar's start when Spain was debating between monarchy, republic, and eternal factions. The maxim remains valid a century and a half later and fits in with Salvador Illa as president of the Generalitat. After 1 year in office, the socialist has achieved an unthinkable goal in recent times, embodying more institutionality than the Statute of Autonomy itself. At Chronica Global, you already know us. We call things by their name and without asking permission. We're far removed from the president's saccharine bourgeois correctness and the exercise of political correctness that permeates its ruling elites in Catalonia. Ia is now one of them. It's bold to say that his religious affiliation is at the root of his moderation. If he overcomes Opus Dei's interest in guiding him, he will have taken a formidable step. And Escrivá de Balaguer's followers hold significant yet secret sway in the autonomous community. So here within the second paragraph of this article, we come to the crux of the matter. In some way, shape, or form, it often comes back to Opus Dei and how Opus Dei has inserted itself into governance, and in this case, I believe this is from Spain, into Spanish governance and politics, and that is not unusual, that is not rare, that is pretty par for course. So let's read on. It makes much more sense for him to govern by remembering his Valesian municipalist past, a great school of integration, pluralism, and democracy with a capital D. Ambition will do the rest. He should avoid being abducted by that exclusive and exclusivist club formed by those Catalans with a desire to transcend history. Catalonia can't afford more Pujols. One and his family and political heirs have been enough. So some context that I can offer you here for those of you who are not Latin or from Spain. I was recently talking with some friends of mine from the UK, and they're planning a trip to the south of Spain here within the next few weeks, and we were talking about Spain, and they were kind of giving me some information just about the history and everything, and the north of Spain, apparently, this is what I was told, the north of Spain, it's kind of, they have a very independent streak. There's this Catalan legacy that is in that region that is kind of a hangers-on from prior to, I believe, like the Spanish Civil War, and they are very independent people. They speak a slightly different style of Spanish that honestly has a lot more in common with like Portuguese or Italian. It's very, very interesting. And so this is, I believe, the Chronica, I believe, is a publication from this like region of Spain where you have this kind of Catalan stronghold. Catalonia is very interested in elevating itself past its very traumatic history, because Spain as a whole has a very, very traumatic history that really isn't all that old. And actually, we're going to be getting into some of that later on in these articles. So let me just keep reading. His style may seem bland, somewhat less so than that of the last Catalan socialist president Jose Montilla, by the way, but it's true that Catalonia didn't need a tribune or a messiah. It was better to have someone put the administration on autopilot after a decade of pro-independence politics that wore down society, fractured the parliament, and suffocated the productive economy. Ia, with the manner of a notary rather than a leader, has been accepted because he represents a rare commodity in Catalan politics: certainty. Ah, yes, the promise of certainty. The method chosen has been pragmatic. Agreements with some and others, concessions that only a few years ago would have sounded like capitulation, gestures toward Madrid and the crown that irritate some and relieve others, unreserved support for the amnesty law, the one that his boss, Pedro Sanchez, said during the election campaign we would never see, the integration of institutional Catalanism into the Spanish framework, and the willingness to negotiate with almost any parliamentary force have marked this intense first year of government. There's a price to pay. Sections of his own electorate are uncomfortable with the Catalan government's language policy. It's too rigid and nationalist for some and too lax for the identity Taliban. The promised one-off funding hasn't materialized. The tweaks to the Catalan tax agency sound cosmetic, and discount over the commuter rail dependence on commuter rail is growing. Despite everything, Ia's voters seem to be giving him some leeway. What's valued in him isn't so much the forcefulness of the measures he adopts as his ability to avoid surprises. Catalan history is rich in episodes where stability brought progress. The man communitant, Commonwealth of Catalonia, of Prat de la Riba, though brief, allowed for the construction of schools, roads, and libraries. The Pujol era of the 1980s and 90s, even with its many shadows, coincided with the Catalan economy's great leap toward European modernity. In contrast, periods of political confrontation, from the Civil War to the decades of the independence process, ended in decline or stagnation. Ia is familiar with his pattern and has decided to establish himself in the tradition of the manager rather than the agitator. So, moves being made. And the reason why this article stood out to me, I'm scanning through the rest of it to see if I want to focus in on anything specific, but the main thing that jumped out to me was that first or second paragraph where they mention Opus Dei and Ia's need to overcome their influence, and that being a significant thing if he is able to do so. The implication being, of course, that Opus Dei is already in those positions of government. Let me see, where was it? Where was it that they said Opus Dei? Right there. So yeah, second paragraph. If he overcomes Opus Dei's interest in guiding him, he will have taken a formidable step. So, of course, the implication being Opus Dei is already there and they very much want to guide him. And maybe it might be in Catalonia's best interests if they did not. That's my read of it. Oh no, what is this? A paywall? Can I get around it? I can. Fantastic. All right, so this next article, I like to feature LGBTQ stories and experiences as much as I can, because while they are an extremely small percentage of the accounts of people that we read about coming out of these religious organizations and orders, it's not completely unheard of. It's not it's not that it never happens. It's not that gay people are not in those environments. It's just perhaps slightly more rare. But I want to highlight them because I still think that it's important, and especially because we know that religion has often functioned as a way to suppress sexuality that is not viewed as in line with the norm. And that's definitely something that we have seen in, I'm not going to finger any one particular religion, honestly, because I think if you look at the histories of most organized religions, they all have a tendency to suppress marginalized groups of people if they hang around long enough and grow to enough influence. So I want to highlight this story here. This was published at the end of the month, but for whatever reason, or the end of August, but I didn't see it until the beginning of September because it got updated, which is something that'll happen. And this is there's a few different stories in here, but I'm just going to focus on the one that caught my eye with the headline, Loves Between a Nun and a Numerary of Opus Dei. And I'm going to switch over to the reader view to avoid the ads. So let's read. Quote, God, if you didn't want me to be homosexual, why did you make me like this? End quote. Susanna, name changed, asked God when she was just over 4 feet tall and hadn't yet had her period. Susanna was studying at an Opus Dei school in Madrid, her family's ideology, and was 9 years old when she heard from a teacher what it meant to be homosexual, to like someone of the same sex. The teacher explained that it wasn't just something wrong, but also something God didn't want. Susanna's stomach ached. That's who I am, she thought. Susanna, now 33, spent many nights praying and confronting God. She couldn't understand why God had made her homosexual if he hated homosexuality. She prayed and hoped everything would change, but it didn't. The passing years intensified those feelings and infatuations. I had a really bad time. I idealized and loved girls. It tortured me. Impossible loves. I prayed a lot. At 14, I started dating boys because that was what I was meant to be. For me, real life had nothing to do with the heart. They treated me well. They were like best friends. We just kissed, Susanna recalls. To avoid thinking about the things that were troubling her, Susanna focused on her studies and the church. She earned top grades in her class and traveled with Catholic youth groups to do social work. At 18, she entered a college to train as a numerary of Opus Dei. Being a numerary entails a commitment of celibacy and usually living in one of the institution's centers. There, at the age of 22, Susanna met Raquel, the 18-year-old sister of a fellow numerary who was also training in Opus Dei doctrine. First, I wasn't attracted to her, but we started to bond. She seemed a little more rebellious. She wore baggy pants. We had a huge connection. We told each other everything. We talked about everything. I just wanted to be with her all day. The attraction was mutual. We didn't talk about it, but we both knew it and expressed it with our eyes. We wanted to do things right. But I even felt pain inside. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. We were in my room. I got up, closed the window, took her hand, and kissed her. Everything we felt was so incredible. But it was sad because we said goodbye like that. We had messed up and couldn't see each other again, Susanna says. But the distance didn't last more than a day. The next morning, Raquel called Susanna and told her she didn't want to be away from her, that she loved her. It really bothered me. I was a numerary, and she was preparing. I couldn't say anything to her or give her any hope, even though I was dying for love of her. I was dying of love for her. I felt so bad that I met with my spiritual director and told him what had happened. He told me the problem was that we were too intimate and that it was confusing, and that the solution was for us to never be alone, always with other people. We did that, but it was horrible because we couldn't talk. One day, we couldn't stand it anymore. We went into a room to talk. The director of the center arrived and opened the door wider for us. "What are you doing here alone?" she asked. The center's directors asked Susanna to reconsider her status as a numerary and her continued presence at the center. Susanna and Raquel left the religious center. For more than 2 years, Susanna and Raquel maintained a secret relationship. They kissed and touched each other in McDonald's bathrooms, Rodea, Zara fitting rooms, and behind trees in El Retiro Park. They attended Mass together and confessed the sin of kissing another woman. The priest's responses ranged from suggesting they distanced themselves from each other to ending the friendship. We tried to make things right. We stopped kissing, but we couldn't. We always fell back into it. She was my life. I couldn't stand even a month's vacation with my family without seeing her, Susanna recounts. "I wish you were a boy, Susie." This is in quotes. "It would be wonderful, and we'd be married by now." That's how Raquel began to speak the day she left Susanna. "But you're not, and I want to get married and have lots of children like my brothers, and you can't give me that." Almost 10 years have passed, and Susanna still remembers how those words affected her. Raquel rejoined Opus Dei, married a year later, and currently has 4 children. Susanna lost weight until she weighed 41 kilos. It took her 18 months to recover. After a while, she decided to change her life. She came out to her family and went online to meet other lesbians. "Since then, I've had 2 girlfriends, and although my life is fine now, I have friends and a job I like, I haven't felt the same way I felt for Raquel for another woman," she concludes. So, honestly, a very sad story, and it makes me sad that 2 people, 2 adults, 2 consenting adults who have genuine feelings of care and love for each other can't be together in this paradigm. And if it had been a man and a woman, then the priest's responses probably would have been very, very different. They would have been advising, chastity and preparing for marriage and that kind of thing, working towards a religious marriage union instead of advising that, they go their separate ways and never see each other again. And this is at the beginning of the article, she's talking about how she was praying and confronting God, not being able to understand why God had made her this way, because obviously she was receiving messaging at the Opus Dei school in Madrid, where, she was informed that being homosexual, being attracted to girls was not okay, actually sinful and dirty and a bad thing. And yet she couldn't do anything to change it because it was who she was. It's who she is as a person inside. You don't have any control over that kind of thing. And the idea that you can change it or just pray it away is so incredibly insulting. Nobody would ever suggest that to a straight person, but for some reason it's okay to say that to gay people. I don't get it. And actually, I'm reading a book right now, another Opus Dei book that came out, and I mentioned it in the August newsroom analysis. This is Tim Pocock's The Truth Will Set You Free, Growing Up Gay in Opus Dei, and I am 2/3 of the way through it now. And if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. It's incredibly well written. It's incredibly sad, but it's also very, very eye-opening for what it is like for gay people growing up in very repressive and controlling environments, what that does to a child, to a young adult, the trauma and the guilt that follow them throughout the rest of their life. This book does a really good job, and I'm sure there's lots and lots of other LGBTQI literature that you can consume. I'm sure, I know there is, but this is just topical because it's specifically about Opus Dei, and that's also what we're talking about here, so I wanted to mention it. He also talks about trying fervently to do anything to pray the gay away, to change who he was, to try as hard as he could to go to sleep and wake up a different person than who he was, because he didn't want to be who he was, because who he was not good enough, dirty, disgusting, not worthy of being in the same social environment as everybody else. And I don't know how you could read stories like that and not be impacted in some way on a personal level. You would have to have no empathy, I think, or be completely unable to think about somebody else's experiences, put yourself in their shoes for a minute, be able to do any of those things. I don't know how you could read a book like this and not come away with just a lot of compassion and care for people in these situations. And that's, again, why I wanted to read these stories. I am not gay, but I have friends who are, and I want them to live in a world where they're loved and accepted for who they are, and this ain't it. So I just wanted to highlight that, and I sincerely hope that Susanna has found happiness and fulfillment, although she says at the end of this article that it's never been the same as it was when she met Raquel. And you never forget your first love. You never forget your first love. Nothing changes you more, and nothing alters your perception of the world more than the first time that you fall in love, and perhaps the first time that you also have your heart broken. And if it's the same person that ends up kind of being involved in both things, it'll completely change the way that you move through the world. I promise. Close some of these down as we're moving along. All right, before I get into this next one, let me take a look at the chat, because I've been seeing it going off this whole time. Wave of Mutilation asked, what's your thoughts on the new Pope? I need to figure out how to pop your comment up on the screen. I don't know how to do that on Streamlabs, which is the software that I'm using. I need to figure out how to do that so I can pop your guys' comments up so that people can see them. But I'm just reading through here, and Wave of Mutilation said, what's your thoughts on the new Pope? Do we want to talk about my thoughts on the new Pope right now? Because I went on a rant last night. All right, fine. We'll get into my thoughts on the new Pope. Why not? Here are my thoughts on the new Pope. I know a lot of people were very, very optimistic when he was elected. And of course, anytime there's a new change, it's an opportunity for things to be done differently, for things to be handled. And I know a lot of people were very excited because Leo is an American and was viewed as a moderate, and people thought that he would probably be more likely to carry on the reforms and everything that Pope Francis was trying to do, allegedly, prior to his passing, better than some of the other cardinals that were being considered potentially. So people were obviously very hopeful about that. I'm just going to tell you about something that happened because it didn't break my brain. It just confirmed my suspicions. So Gareth Gore, who is the author of Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church, which is also it's at the bottom of my stack here. And if you haven't read it, you really, really should, because it's an incredible history lesson. And I guarantee you'll learn some things you didn't know before. But I subscribe to his Substack because he writes really good pieces. And although they go behind a paywall, I think a week after he publishes them, if I catch them right away as a free subscriber, I can still read them. And he's written a couple of articles specifically about Pope Leo, kind of speculating about whether or not Pope Leo was going to go easy on Opus Dei. And he published an article within the last couple of days that I read. And I don't really remember what like the big point of the article was, but he said something in there that just kind of like broke my brain a little bit. And it was like, wow, because then I saw okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm not good at this, at telling this story. So I shared this on my Instagram. You can go and look at it if you want to. It's an excerpt from his article. In this article, he says, I've been working with a group of Opus Dei victims since June to try to secure an audience with Pope Leo. Encouraged by his comments about the urge to root out abuse, we wrote to him. We received confirmation from someone working in the Pope's office that the letter we sent had indeed made its way to Leo, but we have heard nothing. Zilch. While Leo talks about the urgent need to root out abuse and hails journalists for exposing wrongdoing, he refuses to meet with victims of that abuse. During the 3-year process to reform Opus Dei, the Vatican hasn't once tried to reach out to former members to ask for their input. Not once. And I said, in my caption, this is so sad to me. Pope Leo, apparently, can't clear his packed schedule in order to meet with some of the people victimized by a religious organization that is in the church he now runs. But he had all the time in the world to meet with the defenestrated weasel, Juan Luis Cipriani Thorn. Oh, he's got all the time in the world for that. And if you don't know who Cipriani is, I've talked about him in past newsroom analyses. He features prominently in the piece that I am working on right now about the now defunct Peruvian SCV organization. He's a member of Opus Dei. He was essentially disciplined by Pope Francis prior to Pope Francis's death because of a sex abuse case, sex abuse allegations from prior in Cipriani's past. Pope Leo basically told Cipriani, you need to leave Lima, you need to leave Peru, I don't want you traveling anymore. And I also believe that he was told that he couldn't come to like the Vatican, couldn't wear his like garb, robes, clerical stuff. And not only did Cipriani end up going back to Peru, he went back to Lima to get some type of a civil award from the mayor of Lima, Peru, who's this guy named Aliaga, who I will also be mentioning later on in this live stream, who is also a member of Opus Dei, and the two seem to me to be just thick as thieves. And Cipriani has a long history of saying really controversial, outlandish, and incorrect things about everything from human rights to homosexuality, to marriage. I mean, literally everything under the sun. I think he's had an opinion on at some point in time. You can find something somewhere. One of his greatest hits was him saying that all human rights organizations and efforts are essentially Maoist and Marxist. And essentially don't deserve our time. He was very, in statements that he'd made in the past, very anti-human rights. And he also was implicated in essentially defending this now defunct SCV organization, not doing what he should have done as a leader in that country, as a religious leader in that country, when things started coming out about abuses occurring inside this organization. He kind of just didn't take it seriously. Opus Dei also allegedly, apparently, didn't take it seriously. And so it's interesting to me that, you know, Pope Leo, he's just so busy. He's just such a busy man. He can't clear his packed schedule to meet with any of these people who are actively working to try to make reforms and changes in the organization that he is now running. He just doesn't have the time. But he has time to meet with this weasel, Cipriani. Sure, he's got all the time in the world for that. Not only that, but I saw a video on Instagram last night, and this is like, all right, I'm done with the internet now. It was some video of like a meet and greet that some people did with Pope Leo. I don't know where it was. It didn't look like it was the United States. Maybe it was in Italy. I don't know. But these people were like kind of in a line, and he was walking along, shaking hands and handing out rosaries. And the guy in the video is like, there's an American guy, and then you can hear there's like other accents and things. It's like a diverse group of people, but there's an American guy there, and he leans forward to Pope Leo as Pope Leo's like going to shake his hand. He's like, you know, you have had more hot dogs than any pope in the history of the church, because he's from Chicago. And Pope Leo, and everybody kind of chuckles, laughs, guffaws, whatever. And Pope Leo goes, but only with mustard. Only with mustard, not mustard and ketchup. I am so glad that we know how Pope Leo likes his hot dogs. I'm so glad that we know that he likes them with mustard and not mustard and ketchup. And I'm so glad that he and Cipriani got to have a little closed-door meeting. Maybe they had hot dogs together. I hope they did. And I hope they choked on them, honestly. Because Pope Leo is now, for better or for worse, the leader of an organization that has caused immense harm, irreparable damage, to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. But he can't be bothered to meet with those people, even though they've been trying for quite some time. But he has time to handshake and howdy with some people out on the fucking street and talk about how he likes his fucking hot dogs. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's how I feel about Pope Leo. Next question. All right, I'll come back to the chat in a minute. Let's keep reading. So this article, I think it's from a German site, but it auto-translated for me when I opened it up, which is nice. They don't always do that. And it's a pretty good translation. This is interesting. See the headline, the subheading here says, Hope for Clear Words from Pope Leo. So let's read what this author has to say. This was published on the 3rd of September. They're quoting a theologian. Theologians giving their thoughts on the conservative networks that are turning the USA into a theocracy. Democracy is in danger. Theologian Hilly Haker teaches in Chicago and follows developments in the USA at close quarters. She sees ultra-conservative Catholics as at important levers and a reorganization of the system. Reactionary networks are transforming American democracy into a theocracy out of religious conviction, says theologian Hilly Haker. The lecturer in theological ethics at Loyola University in Chicago is observing developments in the USA at close quarters. She writes in the current issue of the magazine Public Forum that ultra-conservative Catholics are part of a cross-religious movement that pursues historical revisionism and promotes the transformation of American democracy into a theocracy with Trump at the helm. The only thing that I think she's absolutely right in that quote. The only thing that I would change about that quote is that the person at the helm, it's just a figurehead, does not matter. If it's Trump now, it'll be somebody else later on down the line. I know everybody hates Trump, and with good reason. I mean, he's despicable, but don't get too bogged down in that to the point where you think that everything bad and everything good hangs on him alone, because that is not true. He's a figurehead. He's one man, probably not, in my opinion, a very smart one, and certainly not the only one pushing things forward. So keep that in mind. I know people hate Trump. They want to hang it. A lot of people want to hang everything on Trump. You just can't. Behind this vision of a post-democratic society led by a white tech elite, Haker analyzes Trump's historical revisionism is imperialist, racist, and sexist. It concerns America's geopolitical claim to the entire North American continent, the history of slavery, and traditional gender order in combination with eugenic ideas of promoting white offspring, writes the theologian. She explains that in addition to large parts of the American Bishops' Conference, 3 other Catholic centers of power are closely linked to the Trump administration. These include movements such as Opus Dei, Knights of Malta, and the Knights of Columbus. Haker also mentions non-governmental organizations such as the Heritage Foundation and the Napa Institute, as well as the legal association Federalist Society. The latter is a center for judges and an engine for the appointment of judges for life. If you want to learn more about the Heritage Foundation and the Napa Institute and how they are fitting into this whole thing, I do have a video all about Opus Dei and Project 2025. Fair warning, I think I managed to mispronounce and therefore piss off like everybody. I mispronounced like every single name, and people were quite upset about it. Nothing to be done about it now. I think the research is still good. Fair warning, though, you are going to hear me mispronounce Leonard Leo's name and the Koch brothers and maybe 1 or 2 other people. And in my defense, it's because I had never heard those names. I have only ever had at that point only read them. I don't consume a lot of news like video media or audio media. I mostly read everything. And so, I'm thinking about people like Leonardo da Vinci and Leonardo DiCaprio. And so when I read Leonard Leo's name, I pronounced it Leonard, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, Leonardo, you just dropped the O. Clearly incorrect. I have been thoroughly eviscerated for it, so if you do go and watch that video, don't feel the need to pile on or anything. But I did talk about all of this stuff. I talked about the Napa Institute and the Heritage Foundation, which Napa Institute is closely tied to this guy in California named Tim Bush, who is a high-flying California Silicon Valley type guy, and obviously the Heritage Foundation is affiliated with Kevin Roberts, and then the Federalist Society is Leonard Leo's thing, and of course Leonard Leo also has connections to the Heritage and the Napa Institute as well, and it's a really interesting world. The Knights of Columbus, actually, I just recently started learning a little bit more about how they work, and I definitely did not realize that it's as significant of an organization as it is. I didn't, like, they have insurance and stuff that they offer their members, so it's not just like a religious club. It's not like just something for the men to go do on the weekends or something like that. It's like a serious thing, and I learned some more about that doing some research for something else. Learned some more about the Knights of Columbus's history and everything, and honestly, it might be worth doing like a deep dive episode into at some point down the road. And then, of course, the Knights of Malta have featured heavily as well. And they're a really weird bunch that I would also like to do a standalone deep dive on. And I just haven't had the time. But all of these organizations, Opus Dei, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, the Napa Institute, the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, and a whole bunch of other unnamed organizations and entities are all a part of this kind of conservative Catholic, the ultra conservative Catholic push that you kind of see here in the United States. And I don't think, based on what I am hearing, that it's just happening here in the United States. I think there are factions, similar factions in all around the world, particularly in Europe and Latin America. And it's interesting how it's kind of, like I had said at the beginning, everything's kind of mirroring itself and happening at the same time. So this theologian views this as a perversion of the Christian message, because the pioneers of this turn were not only suspicious of modernity, but also of democracy. They mistrusted liberalism because it placed the subject at the center of moral judgment, declared faith to be a private matter, and understood society as a contract between free, self-determined people. Haker summarizes that the reduction of social benefits, deportations, and racist xenophobia, as well as talk of the poison of empathy, pervert the Christian message. The theologian is counting on Pope Leo. It is to be hoped that he will find clear words and follow up with deeds that do justice to the claim of Christianity. I ain't holding my breath. All right, let me take a look at the chat again. Let's see. Hi, Ian. Glad you could make it. Hi, Peggy. Glad you're here. Wave of Mutilation. Awesome to have you here from Australia. That is so cool. Your weather is warming up while our weather is getting colder, and I kind of wish I could trade. I'm not super excited about it. Peggy said, Opus Dei is like a roach. They come out of the woodwork. I have to agree. And they seem to have a similar survival strategy as well. This is not the first time that I have heard somebody compare Opus Dei to a roach. That's very common, and I think it's pretty apt. Wave Mutilation, Gore is a great writer. He really is. I enjoy reading his pieces. And I also understand, so he had written an article before the one that I mentioned earlier, where he was talking again about Pope Leo potentially like going soft on Opus Dei and not carrying out the reforms that people were really hoping to see. And in the second half of the article, he kind of spent it just like speculating and opining and editorializing a little bit about like what Pope Francis might be thinking and feeling and how he's viewing all of these different things. And now, knowing that he's been trying to get an audience between victims and the Pope, I understand why he was writing that way and why he was asking those questions and kind of opining in that manner. Because at the time when I read it, I was like, we have no way of knowing what this man, who is now the Pope of the Catholic Church, is feeling or thinking from one day to the next. We have no way of knowing. We're not privy to that information. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my opinion is like, what does it matter, honestly? Because it's not providing any clarity on anything. It's just pure speculation. But now I understand, because in his mind, he's sitting there trying like hell to get an audience. Him and it was the lawyer from Argentina representing the 43, Senor Sal. He and Gareth Gore are trying like hell to get this audience between victims of Opus Dei and the Pope, and it's not happening. Now I understand why Gareth Gore was writing that way and like trying to find some reason, I think, or logic in what the Pope is doing, which has got to be just so incredibly frustrating. I can't imagine it, for the victims and for the people trying to help them, like Gareth Gore, the people who want to still work with the Catholic Church and still want to have conversations with leadership in the Catholic Church. it just seems like an incredibly frustrating and like unrewarding um, row to try to hoe, honestly. And now, we're seeing that apparently, even though there's confirmation that Pope Leo has these letters from victims requesting to meet with him in hand, can't even so much as like send a follow up like, hey, I got your letter, I need to take care of some other things first, but then I want to have a meeting with you, this is a priority that I care about. Something like that would go a long way. I mean, the bar is in hell at this point. Something like that would go a long way for victims who are still holding on to some kind of hope that the Catholic Church is actually going to give a damn about them. And I know that there are people who watch my content who are still Catholic. I know there are people who watch my content who are still Catholic and who are also victims. And I do not want to dash the hopes of a person who is trying to heal. But it is my firm conviction and belief that the Catholic Church does not care, will not care, and could have done so much before now if they actually did care, but they haven't. And I think back to my conversation with activist Peter Saunders. He said, the Pope is an absolute monarch, and there are things that he could do that he has refused to do. And the result has been a whole lot of people with a whole lot of trauma essentially hung out to dry. And unfortunately, the Catholic Church is still positioning itself as a religious organization and not a government, even though I think it's more of a government than it is a religious organization. It's still posturing as a religious organization, and a Christian one at that, which means that the people who are running the show over there are supposed to adhere to Christian ethics and morals, and there is a duty to care for the downtrodden, the afflicted, the abused, and the forgotten. But Pope Leo has all the time in the world to talk about how he likes his hot dogs and meet with Cipriani. Interesting. Hi, Michael. I'm glad you're here. Hi, Ohms. Glad to see you as well. Hi, Medusa. You are welcome. She says, thank you for your work. Love your deep dives. I love doing them. Said, I hate the Heritage Foundation. I don't know much about Napa. Napa is interesting. It's very similar in a lot of ways. It was a West Coast thing up until last year. I believe now they have a office or headquarters or whatever in Washington, D.C. as well. It is a really, really interesting organization, and I get into it a little bit in that Project 2025 video. Michael asks, any news about new statutes of Opus Dei? No, they're on ice. Opus Dei kind of just put them to the side since Pope Francis passed, and we've heard not a thing. Peggy said, Father Arnie Panula befriended Peter Thiel when Thiel was an undergraduate at Stanford, and Father Arnie ran the Opus Dei house. Yes, that is correct. Oh, this is interesting. Ian said, allow me some tinfoil for a moment. Yes, sure, why not? Let's have a tinfoil moment. He said, given Leonard Leo's immense power and influence and his fervent Catholic agenda, do you think the Pope chose the name Leo as a nod to him? What if? I have no idea. I have no idea. I think the name choice is interesting, but as for why, I mean, who knows why these people do anything, right? I truly do not know. I don't know of there being any pre-existing relationship between Pope Leo before he was Pope and people like Leonard Leo or Tim Bush or Kevin Roberts or anything like that. I mean, Pope Leo is American, but from my understanding, he spent a lot of his time in Peru, specifically. And so he's not like an American pope, and he wasn't like an American cardinal in the same sense as like some of these other cardinals are. Like, I'm drawing a blank on the names right now, but they both start with a B. The two cardinals that I'm thinking of, the two individuals, whatever, it doesn't matter. Who knows why these people do anything? It could be that he chose that name as a nod. Who knows? That's a fun theory. Peggy said Hallow is overseen by a board of advisors led by Bishop Kevin Rhodes, who is a firm adherent of Opus Dei and Escriba. It's timely that you mention Hallow. We will be talking about Hallow a little bit later on. Michael said, Rebecca, tell me how much longer I have to wait for the sick organization to be shut down. Every time I come back here, I hope to see the headline, what to do now that Opus Dei has been shut down. I would love to have that be the title of a video. I would love nothing more, but I have no idea how much longer we will have to wait to see anything. I think my opinion is that it will take convictions from criminal and civil authorities from multiple different parts of the world, directed at multiple different people who are all a part of this thing, for it to gain the type of momentum needed for people to seriously consider dismantling it. I mean, Opus Dei is so incredible. They've put themselves in such an incredibly unique position, and I know that was done intentionally. And I mean, all we have to do to know what their plan is for the future is to look at what is written in the 2023 International Ecclesiastical Institutional Complaint that was submitted by Antonio Moya Somolinos et al. To the Vatican about Opus Dei's various frauds against the church and its members and everything. At the end of that document, they say that Opus Dei's plan is to cede without conceding, and that they will basically do whatever they need to do to make do, essentially to go along until such a time as they can fully recover Jose Maria Escriba's plan and mission for Opus Dei. So, you know, I made a comment earlier, somebody in the chat said something about Opus Dei being like a cockroach. Their plan is to outlast whatever type of atomic bomb might be dropped on them. And I think that's what they're going to do. And as long as there's a lack of action from anyone in church hierarchy, I mean, you can't expect anything significant to happen on the Catholic Church's side, which means we're talking civil, we're talking criminal. And those things are happening, but that is a very hard, slow road. It's not easy to bring those kinds of cases forward. Opus Dei has intentionally made it challenging to bring any type of meaningful litigation because it hides behind all of these corporate works and these members who are ostensibly doing things under their own volition that Opus Dei has no connection to. We all know that is horseshit because former members on Opus Dei Exposed and Opus Libris, and to me directly, have said that is horseshit, that's not true. So I don't know how much longer we're going to have to wait. I think that my goal at this point is not to try to get this thing shut down. I don't even know if that's possible. My goal is to just bring information and to continue to shine a light and to promote what I have coined as radical non-participation. I am practicing radical non-participation in my own life. I invite you to practice it in your own, in any way that you can, because it is incredibly freeing, and because I believe that the only way that these institutions will cease to flourish is if they cease to receive fuel and energy and input and money and everything else to keep them going. In essence, if people quit participating. I really do believe that that's the only way that anything is really going to change. We have to stop participating in systems that hurt people. And that means stepping away from a lot of stuff that a lot of us have been raised being told were absolute necessities, cornerstones of our society. We gotta have them or else we'll be morally bankrupt as a people. It means stepping away, releasing that kind of rhetoric, and kind of going back to the basics a little bit, I think. And, for Christianity, for all of my issues with organized religion and Christianity in general, the one thing that is 100% true is that Jesus Christ was a radical and something of a socialist, and not interested in, I think, trying to create a corporate kind of atmosphere. He wanted people to come together in love and to take care of each other and to create a better world. And those are all things that we can still do regardless of what these institutions and the people running them have to say. And if you simply stop participating, all of a sudden things get a lot simpler. I know not everybody can do that. I know that there are complicated reasons for why radical non-participation might not be an option in your situation, but I would wager that there are ways that you could implement it just to assert some of your own independence, some of your own individual sovereignty, some of your own free will. I mean, to really actually exercise those God-given rights. And it's something to think about, because I don't think these organizations are going to go anywhere, honestly. And I hate to say that, because we want to fight for justice and for reform, and I think a big part of that would be for organizations like Opus Dei to cease to exist. But I don't know if that's practical, because of how powerful they are, because of how much sway they have, because of what the organization is and how it's functioning now in society. I don't know if that's practical. And at the end of the day, we have no control over what the Pope decides to do about anything, what the president decides to do about anything, what any leader anywhere does about anything. If you live in a democracy, you can peacefully make your voice heard, and you can try to be a positive force for change. But at the end of the day, you have no real control over what anyone does. All you can control is yourself and what you do and how you respond to things. And so that's why, for me, I've realized that I don't think these systems are going to change on their own. And that's okay. And actually, I don't need them. So I'm just not going to participate. And my goal in presenting this information is to destigmatize radical non-participation, and to illustrate to people that you can do it too. It's actually, it's not impossible, and things can change and can get better when you start asserting your own independence within your own life. It has to start there first. And I think that that's where we're at right now, because, again, we don't have any control over what these people do or say. All we can control is ourselves. So what are you going to do? Oh, Tina's in the chat. Hi, Tina. She said, Opus Dei has been loudly silent since Anne Marie's book came out. Do you think they are gone underground playing the ostrich game, or is there something I've missed? I don't know. Anne Marie's book, I've also got it right here, Serve, was absolutely amazing. Little spoiler, little inside behind the scenes info for you. I got to interview her about her book and her experience, and that will be coming out sometime before the end of the year, and I'm really looking forward to it, because it was an amazing interview, and I was so happy to be able to talk to her about her book and her experience and everything. And I think it's going to be a good conversation for a lot of people to tune into. But her book is loudly condemning Opus Dei for really gross abuses. I mean, there's the whole labor trafficking aspect of it, which is bad enough, but I've said this to a few people. It's one thing to say, Anne Marie Allen was labor trafficked in Opus Dei. That sounds terrible. But what that actually looks like, how that actually manifests in the day-to-day lives of the members who are in that environment, is completely beyond the pale of what I at least could conceptualize under normal circumstances. I am so happy to say that I have never been in situations like that, exposed to that type of abuse and mistreatment, but it blew my mind. And honestly, it like made me want to projectile vomit. Some of the things were so just either disgusting or heartbreaking. For example, one of the disgusting things was that in Ireland, at these centers where Anne-Marie Allen worked, the members were the servant members were expected to eat the leftovers from the higher class members that they had served. So Anne-Marie Allen was recruited as a numerary assistant, although she wasn't told that initially. She thought she was going to a cookery school to get a certificate so that she could go into culinary arts, essentially. She didn't know that she was being recruited into Opus Dei, but that was, when you read the book, pretty clear that that was the plan all along. And she thought she was going to have this experience where she learned things and came out with a way to further herself in life, and that didn't actually happen. What ended up happening was that she was required to cook and clean and do all of this labor for multiple different Opus Dei centers in Ireland, 2 or 3, her and a group of other girls that were recruited. Of course, she was never paid for the work, and although she was given a piece of paper that was apparently a certificate, it wasn't worth a thing. And so one of the things in the book that she writes about, when she's serving these higher class members, the numerary members of Opus Dei, or the students who were going to an Opus Dei school, or were going to school and living at an Opus Dei center, she had to cook and clean and take care of these people, and they would serve them their meals, and then whatever was left on the plates would be what they would eat. So Anne-Marie and these other girls were literally eating scraps. Sometimes they'd dump them all into a pot, add some disgusting soup paste to it, turn it into a kind of gloopy stew. Sometimes they'd dump it into a pan and whisk up a whole bunch of egg, and then dump the egg on top and make this kind of weird quiche bake thing. It kind of depended. And then the other thing that she talked about was how, you know, these higher class members get to eat in a dining room with like linens on the tables and full cutlery and everything matches, and it's all very nice and normal. But her and these other girls had to eat in what was essentially a fucking basement on like a rickety old table with mismatched chairs and like tin cutlery that like what there were no full sets of anything and nothing matched, and it was down in this dank room with like a bulb in the ceiling, and it was just, it's absolutely atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. So, you know, maybe Opus Dei, I think they are kind of allergic to the truth. I've always kind of had that thought that they seem to have a really severe truth allergy. And who knows? I mean, Anne-Marie was spitting some facts in her book, recounting her experience. She stands by everything that she wrote, as well she should. And who knows? Maybe Opus Dei saw that and they're like, I don't know how we're going to respond to this one. Let's just keep quiet for a while and wait till it blows over and something else comes up to take up everybody's mind. Because I'm sure they are relying on the 24-hour news cycle to kind of like bury some things for them as much as anybody else does. All right, so that's enough for now. Let me get on with the articles. I love reading your guys' thoughts, though. Keep them coming. So this next article is an opinion piece. Let me get it translated. This was published September 4th, and I thought this was interesting. This is La Plena, the podcast that listens to young people and brings them together around friendship and faith. What do we think this is about? Quote, do you want to connect with young people? Ask them what they want. With this conviction, Father Juan Carlos Vasquez, priest and digital evangelizer, launched an innovative project at the Church of St. Jose Maria in San Borondon, Ecuador, that today brings young people together around faith and friendship. La Plena, a live podcast that seeks to build a strong community. The priest explained that upon taking over the rectory, he faced a challenge. There was no established youth ministry. Instead of creating a youth group from the top down, we decided to listen to the kids. They themselves told us what they were looking for, and that's where the idea for the podcast was born, he explained. Each episode features 2 hosts, a young woman and a priest, who engage with a guest on important topics without making it seem like a lecture. At La Plana, we don't limit ourselves to a fixed agenda. We discuss issues that truly resonate with young people. For example, we've talked about friendship, family, how to handle failure, and the importance of one's vocation, always in a conversational tone. Not a lecture-like one, said Father Vasquez. So, I don't know that I'm going to read this entire thing. It's not really very long, because what really stood out to me was the fact that this is another initiative, this La Plana. This is in Ecuador, but this is an initiative to connect with young people that was launched by a priest who is working out of the Church of St. Jose Maria in Ecuador. So I don't know if that means that he is Opus Dei himself. I don't know if it says in here if he is or not, but I mean, given the name of the parish, I am led to believe that there is a very strong Opus Dei presence there. And I really think that it's interesting what they say here. At La Plana, we don't limit ourselves to a fixed agenda. They're so easy and breezy. We discuss issues that truly resonate with young people, and they're so in touch with the current issues. For example, we've talked about friendship, family, how to handle failure, and the importance of one's vocation, always in a conversational tone, not a lecture-like one. So, you know, when I see an article about an initiative started by Opus Dei, or if I see an article about an initiative that seems to have a strong Opus Dei flavor, there's certain keywords and things that I look for, and one of the big ones is like an emphasis on vocation. At some point or at some place in some way, I'm looking for someone saying something about the importance of following one's vocation. And the reason why is because even though that's not like a uniquely Opus Dei thing within the Catholic Church, there have been plenty of Catholic saints who have kind of made their fame, for lack of a better term, become known for promoting this kind of idea, for, you know, seeking holiness in everyday life, treating your life, whatever it may be, as holy work, as prayerful work, yada yada yada. I mean, one very like prominent one that I can think of is Saint Therese of Lisieux, who had her little way. So this is not like it's not like a unique thing in the sense that it's like original to Opus Dei, but out of all of the organizations and orders and things that I've been exposed to, I have never heard an organization bang on more about the importance of one's vocation. They do it more, they talk about vocation more, I think, than any religious organization that I have come across yet. Now maybe there's one out there that is just as like passionate about it and I just haven't found them yet. I'm sure that's true. But it's something of a tell, because they always are about that. And I think it's so interesting that like they're talking about, you know, these important issues, friendship, family, how to handle failure, of course, vocation, but they're doing it in a conversational tone, not a lecture-like one. So these aren't orders that are coming down from on high. This is just Father Vasquez trying to give you some good advice about how to live your life, and he's so approachable. And isn't it nice that he's talking about living your life as if it's your vocation? What a nice way to church up what you're doing every single day, right? I kind of get that. But I'm also just suspicious, because we know that a lot of Opus Dei's work and effort is focused on recruiting more people, which is why, you know, they have these youth initiatives. They launched one a few years ago that was literally called Opus Dei Youth. They have this La Plena. Last month I talked about, this isn't, I think, specifically for youth, but it does have a youth aspect. They're doing something in Africa called Be Do Care, which is an initiative that's all about a very similar thing, honestly. And so you see similarities in their like efforts and goals. And when it's directed at young people, I become very suspicious just because of what I know about this organization and how they have gone after young people, predatorily so, I would say, to recruit them to this organization. Because the organization needs people in order to function. I mean, organizations and institutions are nothing but the people who compose them at the end of the day. If all of those people exit, then there's going to be nothing left but a shell. So they need to be trying to continue to recruit, and conversation amongst former members over the last several years has been that Opus Dei is declining and that membership is not what it once was and that they're really struggling. But at the same time, we are seeing them pivot and turn towards education and media, different types of outreach than what they were maybe doing previously. I think they are doing everything that they can to get hip with the times in order to reach a wider audience and potentially pull more people in. That's my opinion and speculation based on what I am seeing here, and what I have seen just in the news over the last several years. So feel free to chime off if you have a thought on this as well. But I wanted to mention this because anytime I see a new initiative started by something with an Opus Dei flavor, and they're targeting young adults, and there's especially when it's like the vocation piece is so heavily emphasized. I just want to mention it. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything untoward. This could be totally awesome. I don't know. But given the organization and the context and everything, I think it's worth being just a little bit cautious. All right, Pope Francis warned the Bishop of Barbastro of mafia intrigues amid the dispute with Opus Dei over Torre Ciudad. So this has been a situation that's ongoing. If you've been here for previous newsroom analyses, then you've seen some of the articles that I've gone over talking about this situation with this shrine. Amid rumors pointing to an imminent solution close to Opus Dei's thesis regarding the dispute over the complex, Bishop Angel Perez Puello once again demands that the statue of the Virgin be returned to its original shrine and warns your pastor will remain faithful to his people. So this was published on the 8th or the 9th. Sometimes I've noticed in non-American countries they put the day first and the month second. But anyway, this was in the earlier half of September. Quote, aware that the truth may suffer, but it never perishes, I confess to you that this claim to our dignity has not been easy, nor has it been easy to raise our voices to defend that our people deserve no less. Pope Francis himself warned me in a handwritten letter dated October 13th, 2024, to be wary of the mafia-like intrigues that are underway surrounding this matter. The Bishop of Barbastro Monzon, Angel Perez Puello, launched a harsh accusation this afternoon regarding the controversy over the Torre Ciudad complex, a dispute between the diocese and Opus Dei, the resolution of which is expected to be imminent. Amid reports pointing to an imminent resolution to the diatribe by the papal delegate Alejandro Arellano, closer to the interests of the work, Perez Puello admitted to being in a particularly delicate moment for our Church of Barbastro Monzon. I share with you, with all sincerity, at the feet of our mother on her birthday, that for 5 years now we have been asking, almost pleading, for respect for the dignity of our people, humble and small, yes, but with a gigantic dignity and unwavering fidelity, as they have been able to demonstrate throughout the centuries, the bishop emphasized in his homily, recalling the unwavering support he received from Bergoglio from the beginning. Pope Francis welcomed this plea during his ad limina visit in December 2021, and he took an interest in and embraced the feelings of our people, reflected in a handwritten letter of his in 2023, clearly instructing your bishop in his particular Argentinian accent, Angel, do not give in, so that he would bring our mother back to her original hermitage, he noted, referring to the statue in Torre Ciudad, which historically rested in a hermitage and which for decades has been in the sanctuary owned by Opus Dei, and inaugurated days after the death of Escriva de Balaguer in 1975. So basically, I don't know how much they're going to explain this, so I'll just say this real quick. The shrine is a huge complex. Like, it's huge, and they built a new, like, main shrine, but on that property is another smaller chapel that had been there, like, before Opus Dei ever got their grubby mitts on it. And inside of that shrine, there is this statue of the Virgin Mary. And somehow, some way, at some point, Opus Dei went into this chapel and took that statue and put it in their like larger chapel or whatever, their shrine or whatever. And they've been asking for it back. The people have been asking for their statue back, and that's a part of this whole conflict with Torre Ciudad, is this statue and the fact that it's essentially being held hostage by Opus Dei. Later, in a public audience in St. Peter's Square on September 18th, 2024, 7 months before his death, he told me clearly and directly when greeting me, "Angel, have they brought the Virgin down yet?" Perez Puello revealed, who once again demanded that our beloved Virgin of Torre Ciudad, who for more than 1,000 years has been in the hands of our people, who have loved her, touched her, kissed her, and protected her even at the cost of their own lives during the war, return to the hermitage where she always remained. This is not a trivial request, but rather a demand for the same dignity that is respected in other places like Fatima or Lourdes, the bishop insisted. This is how the dignity of poor and humble places is also respected, he emphasized. And in what some interpreted as a warning, Perez Puello recalled how I have gladly come fighting to the point of exhaustion in defense of our people, their dignity, their devotion, and popular religiosity, regardless of any sacrifice. Therefore, if forced as a pastor, I would repeat the same words of the elderly Eleazar when forced with pressure to accept what I cannot accept, that I cannot do so without bringing stain and dishonor to my old age that could serve as a bad example to my parishioners. The bishop concluded his homily, stating that Our Lady of the Angels of Torre Ciudad must be venerated in her small and humble abode, from where she should have never left after 1,000 years of history in the hands of a people who venerate her with enormous devotion. And that is why, he concluded, I want to assure you that your pastor will always remain faithful to his people, to that small flock of enormous dignity that it is my greatest pride to serve, and it will be so until the end. So another development in this entire thing, and the fact that this bishop is saying that the Pope, prior to his death, Pope Francis, warned him about Opus Dei and essentially of mafia intrigues with this whole dispute over this Torre Ciudad, I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to bring it up and mention it. I haven't been following this thing super closely, but I have been keeping a little bit of an eye on it, and so in the interest of just presenting a new development, I wanted to include this as well. As far as I know, as of today, October 13th, there still is not a solution or any type of agreement that's been reached. As far as I know, the statue is still in the bigger Opus Dei shrine. They don't want to give it back. All right, so this is another article about Opus Dei and in Spain. This was written on, is there a date? September 8th. The largest park in Iruña belongs to the Opus Dei University. The Opus Dei University of Navarre campus is full of green spaces, but not without controversy. From the land acquisition in the 1960s to the Donna Pia plan, the City Hall footbridge, and the recent felling of 123 trees, what lies behind the city's largest park. So this article is interesting. It's not overly long, but it does give some history and context about one of Opus Dei's properties, which is obviously this massive University of Navarre, which is kind of, I feel like, one of Opus Dei's sort of flagship universities. And what they have to say here about the university and what they've been doing with the property is really interesting, and I wanted to read it. The University of Navarra UNAV campus is located near the confluence of the Alors and Sadar rivers. The intense green of its gardens marks the boundaries of the university city, whose land extends over 113 hectares south of the Iturrama neighborhood of Iruña. Its grounds are home to more than 5,690 trees of 173 different species belonging to the botanical route. I wonder if those are all native species. Probably not. This is announced by the institution on its website, proud to boast the largest park in the city. The halt in the felling of more than 100 trees on the grounds of the private university has recently been announced. The news has surprised the population of Navarre, who are accustomed to defending the city's vegetation, as in the case of the trees in Plaza de la Cruz, but are normally unaware of what is happening on campus. There, 123 trees have been suddenly lost and without warning. The Iruña City Council immediately halted the felling, explaining that it had not granted the university any permit to carry it out. In response to the situation, the Opus Dei University issued a statement attributing the incident to a misunderstanding, claiming it had requested the City Council's permission to remove diseased or degraded trees that could pose a risk to public safety. The urban planning and urban conservation departments have investigated the source of the misunderstanding and have discovered gaps in the file, which is incomplete due to the lack of justification for the land survey plan, which is subject to the building permit and the permits processed. Likewise, garden service personnel visited the area to inspect the poor condition of the felled trees and found no signs of significant rot. The local government board has therefore given the University of Navarra a 1-month deadline to justify the felling of the trees, or else it will have to restore them or face fines. Now, before I move on real quick, it's not this article, I don't think, but in another article that I read, they were talking about this situation, and they had some pictures of some trees that were apparently on campus that had not been cut down yet, and I mean, they didn't look good to me. They looked like standing deadwood that probably did need to come down because it was a hazard. I mean, right here, it's impossible to know what these trees looked like before they were cut down, right? But I can at least see that it looks like there's a little bit of a walking trail here in this path. There's a little bit of a stream. Maybe this is like a hiking trail or something, a walking path on university campus. And obviously, having that path lined with standing deadwood would be a huge safety hazard. So assuming that this is true and that all of the 123 trees that were felled were true standing like deadwood, then I can understand taking them down. Like I said, the one picture that I saw of still standing trees, the trees didn't look good, and it was clearly taken like during a time where there should have been foliage on the branches and everything, and there wasn't any. So they say that in this picture here, the institution believes it is necessary to cut down 7.5% of the current trees. And that's certainly possible depending on the state of the timber and everything. But again, because there are no pictures of like what the trees looked like before they came down, it's really hard to say. And it's interesting that there are like these gaps in this file that Opus Dei is claiming that they like took care of prior to felling anything. And now the city is basically saying that they need to come up with a good justification, implying that they did not have one previously, which leads me to believe that they may have been felling trees that were not actually sick or dead, but maybe just were in the way because they have a plan of some sort. They always have a plan. But I'll read on here because this is interesting. It says, the episode is revealing of the way this immense campus is managed. However tense the relationship between the city council and the private university may seem today, the situation was very different 70 years ago when the first bricks began to be laid on the campus. This is explained by Ricardo Felu, a sociologist and professor at the UNED in Vitoria-Gasteiz. I'm sure I mispronounced that, I'm sorry, who has studied the origins of the center and the influence of Opus Dei in Navarre. The University of Navarre was founded in 1952 as a result of an initiative proposed by Jose Maria Escrivá, founder of Opus Dei, and a group of professors and academics. At that time, the institution, known as the General Study of Navarra, offered only law classes at the headquarters of the Court of Auditors. Space was limited, so the creation of the university city began to be considered necessary to expand the educational offerings and admit more students. Despite not having enough land on which to build the 14 faculties that currently exist, the plan was possible thanks to the support of the Provincial Council of Navarre and the City Council of Iruña, still in the darkest phase of Franco's regime. According to Feliu, two reasons drove the development of the Opus Dei University project in Navarre: the convenient location for the congregation and the desire to create a higher education institution in the region. The Opus Dei congregation saw Navarre as an opportunity to escape Madrid and expand, explains Feliu, recalling the social rejection they were receiving in the Spanish capital. Navarre was a much more peaceful place, sociologically and ideologically, conducive to establishing their expansionist project and conveying their developmentalist and technocratic discourse, he emphasizes. Given the possibility of building a higher education center, the mayors of Iruña during the 1960s wanted to promote the project and decided to facilitate the acquisition of the necessary plots of land, which at the time were privately owned. Mayor Miguel Javier Urmeneta played a key role in the creation of the university. He wanted to invest in it to modernize Navarrese society, Filiu explains. The process of obtaining the land dragged on for years, during which the University of Navarra required the cooperation of the city council, which agreed to acquire the land from the individuals affected by the compulsory expropriation procedure and then transfer it to the private institution. Interesting. So, reading between the lines a little bit there, what I think they're saying, they agreed to acquire the land from the individuals affected. So it sounds to me like there were people who owned the land who lost it because of something like eminent domain, which in the United States, eminent domain is what will be enacted like if they need to put a road in and your house is like right in the middle of where that road needs to go. There's laws in the United States that say that, you know, the government can't just, the state or the federal government can't just take that land away from you without giving you something in return for it. There's been precedent set by court cases and stuff that I could get into, but it's kind of beside the point. The point being, if you lose a property because of something like eminent domain, you are still paid for it. You're supposed to be paid for it, and it's supposed to be, you know, you're supposed to be paid what the property is actually worth. It's not supposed to be like pennies on the dollar or anything like that. And it sounds to me like something similar happened here because the city council agreed to acquire the land from individuals affected by the compulsory expropriation procedure, which I haven't Googled that, and I also haven't looked up like Spanish law, if Spanish law has anything similar to eminent domain, but that's certainly what it sounds like to me. And it's interesting that it would have been then transferred to a private institution. The land was then, because in the United States, eminent domain is usually for like to create something for like the public good, like a road, some type of access. I believe President Theodore Roosevelt used something like eminent domain whenever he established the national park systems, established national parks here, because obviously those lands belonged to somebody before they became national parks. That kind of thing is not uncommon, but the thing about national parks and roads and that kind of thing is that they are public resources, public goods that, you know, everybody can kind of use, whereas a private institution implies that it's sort of a closed door by invite only type of a thing, which again, it may be different in Spain. I know that Europe and, you know, non-American places just have different ways of doing things, and they have different language, and a private institution in Spain might not mean the same thing as a private institution here in the United States. I'm not really sure, but it's interesting to me that some people apparently lost their land and then had it given to this Opus Dei University. Interesting. And it says that to achieve this, the institutions of the time had to implement various legal measures to facilitate the process. So they didn't have something like eminent domain, which is kind of its own like standard procedural thing. Once you declare eminent domain, there's steps and policies that you have to follow and so on and so forth. I don't know I don't know what the situation in Spain is like. If you have some information about that, definitely sound off, because I'd be interested to hear it. It says therefore, the land owned by the Opus Dei University of Navarre is largely the result of grants from the Navarrese authorities, a reality that was disliked by some citizens at the time, but which has become permanent. Yeah, I think it's exactly what I thought. Interesting. It's a space with private security and its own specific rules, which once persecuted couples who displayed behavior considered immoral and which still restrict festive or sporting activities. This makes the campus a vast and pleasant space, but one rarely visited by the general public. In recent decades, the Opus Dei congregation's educational institution has also been embroiled in controversy over possible preferential treatment. One of the controversies arose from the land claim for the Donapia CIP Center. The controversy surrounding the center's plot has a long history, dating back to the 1970s. In 1976, the Ministry of Education and Culture announced plans to establish a vocational training center in Iruña. At a time when the Opus Dei University was planning to expand its campus southward by acquiring adjacent land, the then mayor Jesus Maria Velasco and the aforementioned Miguel Javier Urmeneta, director of the Municipal Savings Bank at the time, took the initiative and placed it in the name of the city council. The latter proposed it as a plot for the construction of Donapia, thwarting the congregation's plans there. However, the University of Navarra did not give up the battle, and in 2013, when it again wanted to expand its domains, it filed a request to acquire the plot where the Public Vocational Training Institute currently stands, separated from the university city only by a vegetation barrier composed of poplars, which are all these trees here in the picture, I guess. Among the reasons listed for the need for this land, the private institution argued that the density of buildings on campus had increased significantly in recent years, rendering the more compact layout inadequate for maintaining the American University Park style. I think there's a helicopter overhead. They're coming for me. No, they're not. There's a helipad not too far from me, so they kind of fly in low often. I hope that's not too distracting for you guys. Let's see. Among the reasons listed for the need for this private land, the private institution argued that the density of buildings on campus had increased significantly in recent years, rendering the more compact style inadequate for maintaining the American University Park style. It explained that continuing to build on the north bank of the Sator River would increase the environmental impact of the buildings, a situation that would be preferable to avoid. If awarded the land, UNAV intended to build 3 new research centers there and asserted that the plot's characteristics, including buildings and access areas, would facilitate immediate installation, saving time and money for the project. The institution also envisioned the possibility of future expansions due to the available space. In view of a possible relocation of the Donapia CIP Center to the San Jose plot of land with the intention of freeing it up for the Opus Dei University, citizens mobilized and expressed their opposition to this maneuver in favor of public education. This project was thus halted, and the private university renounced its claim to the land. Just over a decade ago, another less well-known controversy arose, that of the University of Navarra Museum's footbridge. The project aimed to build a 5-meter-high bridge connecting Inigo Arista Street to the Iturrama neighborhood with a museum crossing over Avenida de Navarra. The idea was part of UPN's investment draft for 2015 and was criticized by the then opposition group E.H. Bildu due to the cost of approximately 800,000 euros for the city council. Consequently, the project remained a draft as most groups did not consider such work appropriate or a priority. The current tree conflict, along with a parallel closure or conversion of the road that crosses the campus, now brings this enormous public use but privately owned park, which occupies a large part of Iruña's map, back into focus. So I thought that was really interesting. I like reading about the properties that Opus Dei owns whenever they come up in the news, because you always end up learning something a little bit interesting about the history of the institution, organization, whatever in question. So I thought that was interesting, and having a little bit of history and context for the University of Navarre is not a bad thing. This university has come up in my research in the past. I just have not yet found a causal, for certain link between the university or individuals at the university and some of the things that I'm looking into. But this university is a huge mover and shaker in the Opus Dei world. You cannot discount that. And I think it's really, really interesting that they managed to grow this campus by essentially taking lands away from people who already owned them. That's how it read to me. All right, so we mentioned the Hallow app earlier. Here it is. Praying with Stars writes invest millions in the Catholic prayer app Hallow. We've got Marky Mark, JD Vance, this guy from Guardians of the Galaxy, and is that Blake Shelton's girlfriend? I'm not sure. Anyway, this is talking about the Hallow app, which if you're a Catholic, I'm sure you've heard about it. I don't really know a whole lot about it, so I'm sorry, I need to see some news headlines and things, and let's read this one here and see if we can learn something new. This is from September 11th. It says more and more people are turning their backs on the Catholic Church, instead turning to apps like Hallow, which promise spirituality and prayer via subscription. But behind the simple design lies more than just a digital rosary app. It's about content from the ultra-conservative Opus Dei, about millions of dollars in investments from Trump confidants like JD Vance and Peter Thiel. It's about celebrity marketing stars like Mark Wahlberg, Gwen Stefani, yeah, I think she is dating Blake Shelton, who's a country singer, and the great-grandson of the last Austrian emperor, Ferdinand Habsburg, and about massive data protection issues. This is a really long article. We'll see how far we get before I decide to move on. It says the Catholic Church is losing its followers. In Austria, the number of Catholics fell by 1.8 million between 1991 and 2023, equivalent to about 28% of the membership. The figures for church attendance are even more dramatic. In 1991, 1.3 million Catholics attended Mass during Lent. By 2023, the number had fallen to just 322,000, a decline of 75%. Wow. The result, fewer and fewer people are attending church in the traditional sense. I also think COVID accelerated that as well, because during COVID, Catholic Church had to figure something out, and so they were telling people like, oh, you can make a spiritual communion, you can make a spiritual confession, you don't have to, we're gonna, like, it's possible for you. They're like tripping over themselves, trying not to admit that, like, you can have a relationship with God without us, but we'd also still like if you were still around. And I think COVID kind of accelerated that, because people didn't have any other option but things like apps like Hallow or live streaming services or whatever. And I have to think that a lot of people, once they started doing that, were just disinclined to go back to doing things the way they had been before, especially because, and I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but in the United States, my experience growing up in Catholicism in the Midwest was that, like, unless you had an uncommonly good congregation of people, and unless you had an uncommonly charismatic priest, the odds were that you were going to have a pretty bland experience going to church. And unless you are like really like serious about receiving sacraments like communion and reconciliation and everything, there might not be a reason for you to go back if you just, it's somewhere that you feel obliged to go, and you don't necessarily have like the warmest, fuzziest experience while you're there, but it's important to you because it's like a spiritual religious observance. But then there's a global pandemic and the church comes out and says, well, you can stay home and still get the same benefits and it'll be okay. I'm not surprised that attendance has dropped 75%. So fewer and fewer people are attending church in the traditional sense, and it's because of new digital offerings. Apps like Hallow are designed to reach people who no longer set foot in church, but are instead glued to their smartphones every day. Founder and CEO Alex Jones, that's an unfortunate name, promises, I don't think it's the same Alex Jones of InfoWars infamy, promises prayer and the experience of faith via smartphone in the middle of everyday life, available around the clock. That would be a hell of like an evolution story. Go from being like the InfoWars guy of Sandy Hook infamy to then the founder of an app, a Catholic prayer app. I don't think it's the same person, but that would be hilarious. The Hallow app is also has another side, prayer on a paid subscription basis. Content from ultra-conservative organizations, critical celebrity marketing, potential influence in the U.S. election campaign, and data protection issues. We downloaded the app to see for ourselves and spoke to social ethicist Linda Cruiser about the app. She conducts research at the Faculty of Catholic Theology at the University of Vienna. The Hallow app claims to be the #1 prayer app in the world. 700 million people have listened to a prayer, and in 2024 even reached #1 in Apple's App Store. I do remember seeing that. I remember Opus Dei news headlines specifically talking about that. They were really over the moon. We wanted to take a closer look, so we downloaded it. The app offers daily prayers, rosaries, Bible texts, meditations, and even sleep music. There are also challenges like playful series of tasks. For example, during Lent, first the app asks you about goals you want to achieve. These are religious in nature, such as draw closer to God, reconnect with my faith, but also more everyday, such as sleep better, reduce stress, or patience and humility. After setting goals, you'll be greeted by an audio library covering various life topics. Most of the videos are between 5 and 15 minutes long. They range from classic Christian topics like hope or gratitude to audiobooks about Jesus of Nazareth in the category Being in a Relationship, which explores how a marriage should be structured according to Paul. I always think it's interesting whenever Paul is the one that is the source of how things should be done. I've heard people make the argument that Christianity isn't really Christianity so much as it is Paulism, because so much of the dogma and doctrine is actually more so based on like the writings and teachings of St. Paul, more so than anything that like Jesus said. And I think actually that there's an interesting case to be made there. I'm not going to really get into the weeds of that too much now, but if you're interested, there are some good videos on YouTube that you can kind of search for and learn some more about that. But I mean, Paul was an unmarried man, but apparently he's very qualified to give advice on relationships existing 2,000 years after his death, but I digress. Unsurprisingly, the app conveys a conservative image of marriage exclusively between a man and a woman. However, the speakers of the audio videos are striking influencers, famous actors and musicians, and controversial U.S. bishops. I don't know that that's striking so much as exactly what you would expect to see. Celebrities are a key advertising tool for the prayer app. They recite the lyrics and prayers and promote the app on social media. Actor Mark Wahlberg poses as a Catholic husband and father and talks about fasting and how to pray. That's funny. U.S. singer Gwen Stefani called for a prayer challenge. My phone is ringing. Give me just a second. I gotta hang that up. Getting a phone call in the middle of my live stream. That has not happened before. Where was I? So I got Mark Wahlberg giving marriage advice and talking about how to fast. They've got U.S. singer Gwen Stefani talking about a prayer challenge called Before Easter. They've got Chris Pratt publicly promoting Hallow. Social ethicist Linda Cruiser tells Contrast that apps like Hallow focus on self-optimization through the presence of celebrities and neglect social issues. Celebrities are used as transport figures, as role models. This underscores the individual focus of such apps. It's about a kind of self-optimization, but it prevents users from thinking socio-politically. Social aspects, such as injustices in our society, are only inadequately conveyed or addressed in these applications. The over 900-year-old Hilgenkruz Abbey in the Vienna woods is bringing its daily Monk's Minute to the app. There, Cistercian monks from Lower Austria recite the Gospels and offer brief interpretations on weekdays. The app also features well-known Austrian faces. Racing driver Ferdinand Habsburg, a great-grandson of the last Austrian emperor, invites users to fast with him. The fasting program, which users are supposed to experience together with the racing driver, comes from the writings of Opus Dei, an institution founded by Jose Maria Escrivá. It's been criticized for decades. Former members report exploitation, control, and religious abuse. In Argentina, 43 women are suing for human rights violations, and a Spanish documentary series reports on manipulation and isolation. The app also criticizes its proximity to authoritarian regimes such as Franco in Spain and Pinochet in Chile. Hallow does not distance itself from these with such challenges. I don't really understand what they mean by that. All right, so they got people like Bishop Robert Barron. That was one of the B characters that I was thinking of earlier that I couldn't remember the name of. He's cooperated with people like Ben Shapiro. The British actor and comedian Russell Brand also openly promoted the prayer app, but in 2025 he was charged by London police with 2 counts of rape, 2 counts of sexual assault, and a further charge of indecent harassment. He's a menace, based on what I have learned. By the way, Russell Brand, stay far away from me. As a result of these charges, the popular prayer app announced that it would end its collaboration with Brand. Nevertheless, years of collaboration show that the platform benefited from his prominent image until the end, and that the allegations did not pose an obstacle to joint projects for a long time. Here they're saying that sensitive religious data sold for advertising. It says in 2022, the Mozilla Foundation investigated the app and identified serious flaws. Sensitive data, including personal information, usage times, and even prayer minutes, was used for interest in behavior-based advertising. I mean, it's Opus Dei. What do you expect? All they do is try to figure out what people are thinking and feeling at every single possible moment of every single day so that they can do what they do. The operators promised improvement and changed their guidelines. Today, Hallow emphasizes that diary entries are only accessible to the users themselves and that sharing sensitive religious data is only possible with explicit consent. Nevertheless, the impression remains. Those who pray also produce data, and this data is worth cash to a company. Oh yeah. Hallow has long been more than an app. It's an investment with political influence. Its path even leads to the White House. Invested in sometimes the sentences get a little messed up with the translation. Invested in right libertarian tech billionaire and Kurt's friend Peter Thiel, Trump's vice president J.D. Vance, $40 million in the company through the venture fund Naria Capital, which Vance founded in 2019. So there's a bunch of money from Vance and apparently also Thiel potentially going into this app. The app also appears repeatedly in the U.S. media. Fox News broadcasts so-called sponsored prayers, paid advertising moments in which prayers from the app were read aloud. Peter Thiel, the billionaire tech investor and co-founder of PayPal, has played an important role in the intersection of data and politics in the past. According to a report by the U.S. media outlet Vox, Thiel's company Palantir signed contracts worth around $1.5 billion with the Trump administration in 2016. These involved the collection and analysis of large amounts of data. Observers see this as a warning signal. If Thiel now also invests in religious apps like Hallow, their enormous data collection could also be used politically in election campaigns. Yeah. In 2024, there was even a dedicated prayer challenge for the U.S. election titled One Nation Under God. The conservative content on the Hallow app, the marketing strategy, and the political investors clearly place the app in a campaign-related context. That's interesting. In 2024, there was a prayer challenge for the U.S. election titled One Nation Under God. There were a lot of prayer challenges that were going around leading up to the 2024 election. After 7 days, our trial subscription to the Hallow app ends. To use all of the app's features, we would have to pay $70 per year. Hallow relies on a business model similar to Netflix or Spotify, a subscription. The question that arises is faith becoming a product and spirituality a commodity? Gamification reinforces this effect. Those who pray collect streaks, bonus points called lucky streaks in the app. These are intended to keep believers in the app even beyond the trial period, and it's been successful. In 2023, the app generated revenue of over $33 million. Oh, this is that Sebastian Kurz guy who has in the image, has close ties with Hallow investor Peter Thiel. And here they met at the 2017 Munich Security Conference. And that picture in the background is creepy. Money has always played a major role in religion and especially in churches. According to social ethicist Linda Cruiser, it becomes problematic when religion is run like a business, when customers pay for spiritual offerings and their needs are served like a market. And didn't the Catholic Church already learn its lesson with the whole plenary indulgence for sale scam thing that they did back during the medieval age? Faith is thus reduced to a commodity. We asked her what danger lies behind this. The idea of being able to buy salvation is an old temptation, but ultimately always a scam. While such apps can provide basic education and religious practice, they lead to a severely narrowed concept of religion if they are not translated into reality. I agree. So that's interesting. Good to know more about this Hallow app. I am sure this app is not going anywhere, and we will only continue to see more. I remember when I saw that Marky Mark had allegedly converted to Catholicism. There was like a rash of people that were doing that. Shia LaBeouf allegedly also converted to Catholicism, although I suspect that was because of his like method acting thing that he likes to do. And he was like getting ready for a role where he was playing Padre Pio, which is funny too. And he converted like ahead of that because he likes to get really into his roles and everything. So now they've got these people promoting this app, and it's raking in the cash. So here's another article about Torre Ciudad. The end of the struggle between the diocese and Opus Dei over the fetish sanctuary of Escriva de Balaguer. So maybe we're going to get some answers in this article about what's going on. In the coming days, the Vatican will announce its final verdict on the complex conceived by the founder of Opus Dei and an unprecedented confrontation between the Bishop of Barbastro Monzon and the authorities of the work which Pope Francis began and Leo must complete. The decision is practically made and we'll know in a few days. The laconic response echoes within the walls of the Vatican. The question is simple. When will Rome issue a ruling on the Torre Ciudad conflict? 5 years after the initial talks and after a mountain of agreements and disagreements, everything seems to indicate that the decision is imminent from the Pontifical Commissioner Plenipotentiary appointed by Pope Francis, Alejandro Arellano, to settle the dispute between the Diocese of Barbastro Monzon and Opus Dei over the complex fetish of the founder of the work, Jose Maria Escriva de Balaguer, and it surely won't satisfy, at least not completely, either party. This Saturday, the vicar of Opus Dei in Spain, Ignacio Barrera, will preside over the traditional Marian Day of the Family in Torre Ciudad. He does so after the bishop of Barbastro Monzon, Angel Perez Puello, warned last Monday of the mafia-like intrigues. The late pontiff was one of Perez Puello's greatest supporters when he launched an unequal battle against the prelature for none other than control of one of Opus Dei's crown jewels, a sanctuary dedicated to the Virgin Mary who, according to official biographies, cured Escriva de Balaguer as a child. No one expects a public response from Barrera to Perez Puello, although no one rules it out either. If the bishop used Monday's homily, why wouldn't the vicar do so? Enigmatically, sources close to the Opus Dei ask. This is happening in the midst of the festivities of the 50th anniversary of Escriva's death and the construction of Torre Ciudad, an anniversary that Opus Dei intended to celebrate with the conflict resolved. The Opus Dei failed to appreciate the push from a bishop who had already overcome ecclesiastical and civil resistance to the return of the assets of the Strip to Aragon, and who, on this issue, doesn't seem willing to throw in the towel either, at least until Rome makes its final ruling official. This is a scenario that differs greatly from that of Bergoglio's time. The current pope is not exactly a fan of Opus Dei, but Francis demoted the work by considering it a clerical association without its previous powers and privileges. Even the prelate, Fernando Ocaires, lost episcopal rank. Now, Prevost must approve the new statutes of Opus Dei to adapt to its new status. What will Rome ultimately say? According to sources consulted by El Diario S, Commissioner Arellano's opinion will be very similar to the draft agreement presented to the parties in June, which leaks close to the Opus Dei organization demolished. That is, Torre Ciudad will become a diocesan sanctuary, dependent on the diocese, and the bishop could appoint the rector, but from a short list proposed by the prelature, to which management of Torre Ciudad would be seated. In return, Opus Dei would substantially increase its annual contribution to the diocese, while the original statue of the Virgin, venerated for 1,000 years in the area, would make a pilgrimage twice a year to the original shrine. They wouldn't even let it go back to the original shrine? That doesn't seem right. The leak of this potential agreement prompted a final proposal from the diocese very similar to the current one, except for one key issue, that the Holy See and not Opus Dei would take charge of everything related to the management, including the assets of the complex, which would thus become an international sanctuary. With this premise, one of the tasks that Francis entrusted to the commissioner when he appointed him papal commissioner for Torre Ciudad would also be fulfilled. This task was not only to determine who would control the complex, to undertake an audit of the complex to unravel possible financial or asset irregularities in the surrounding area. In fact, Arellano's work was expected to go beyond mere mediation, which was not his role, between the bishopric and Opus Dei, and to focus on an analysis of the reality of Torre Ciudad from all angles, something he has failed to do. Throughout this year, Ariano has only visited the area 2 or 3 times. He hasn't led the 50th anniversary events or commissioned an external audit to unravel the complex's finances. He has simply listened to the arguments of both sides without delving into the underlying issues. Because economics is also at the root of this conflict, and not, as media outlets sympathetic to the work have insisted, because the diocese wants to increase Opus Dei's annual donation, a ridiculous 1932 euros at the current exchange rate, by transferring the image of the Virgin in perpetuity, nor by the amount of 600,000 euros suggested by some, but because of rumors about possible financial transactions related to the area, as well as a lack of transparency regarding the source of the funds supporting Torre Ciudad, one of the most visited shrines in Aragon. And what I think they're saying and not really saying, and what I suspect, is that there's some suspicion of some money laundering potentially going on. Allegedly, of course. I don't know anything for certain, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I have been told by former members of Opus Dei that money laundering is a thing that apparently does happen, allegedly. And these huge, expensive properties that Opus Dei owns are certainly a very handy way to clean some money if you needed to. For example, disguise the fact that it all came from, I don't know, an Opus Dei center with a whole bunch of assistant numeraries and had never been paid or something. It says the ultimate reason for the diocese is a question of dignity. As Perez Puello noted this week, for 5 years now we have been asking, almost pleading, for respect for the dignity of our people, humble and small, yes, but with a gigantic dignity and unwavering loyalty, as they have demonstrated over the centuries. A struggle between David and Goliath that, if no one corrects it, seems to be going in favor of the giant. Let's see, we're almost to the end here. It says, Our Lady, so this is the final quote, it says, Our Lady of the Angels of Torre Ciudad must be venerated in her small and humble abode. We read that quote in the last article. So that even if it costs him his job, he's already said he doesn't intend to resign. Angel doesn't give in. And he hasn't up until now, and at least until the final decision is made. So I thought this was going to tell us something, but really we're still just kind of waiting to see what happens. Oh, look, Juan Luis Cipriani, accused of sexual abuse, reappears alongside Rafael Lopez Aliaga during an event in Madrid. The Cardinal, sanctioned by the Vatican, was the guest of honor at a charity dinner to raise funds for a program that seeks to bring clean water to vulnerable areas of Lima. Cardinal Juan Luis Cipriani, who was sanctioned by the late Pope Francis following allegations of sexual abuse, reappeared publicly this Thursday in Madrid during a charity event, also attended by the mayor of Lima, Rafael Lopez Aliaga. The Archbishop Emeritus of Lima and first Cardinal of Opus Dei was the guest of honor at a dinner to raise funds for the Emergency Water Program, an initiative led by the mayor to improve access to drinking water in the most underserved areas of the Peruvian capital. According to images released by the YouTube channel Libertando Peru, which had interviewed the mayor a few days earlier, Cipriani was placed at the same table as Lopez Aliaga, along with the executive of the Lima Foundation, Javier Cipriani, who I think is his brother, if I'm not mistaken, and former presidential candidate Alfredo Barnechea. Videos are also circulating on social media showing the cardinal blessing the table at the master of ceremonies' request. Quote, bless all our friends with whom we will share, always looking with great affection and solidarity. May God protect us and may the mayor go forward, he can be heard saying in the auditorium. The Vatican has imposed disciplinary restrictions on Cipriani, including his departure from the country, a ban on wearing cardinal insignia, and a ban on making public statements, the Holy See Press Office explained at the time. However, he was seen dressed as a cardinal at the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, where more than 100 cardinals prayed at Francis' tomb on the eve of the pontiff's burial. Asked about his presence, Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni stated at a press conference that he had no instructions on the matter and that information could be provided, although he clarified that not all sanctions imposed have been fully disclosed. For his part, Cardinal Pedro Barreto, president of the Ecclesiastical Conference of the Amazon, confirmed that his accused counterpart was not authorized to attend the Pope's coffin due to restrictions he himself imposed. It was prohibited, he stated in a previous interview. The Peruvian Episcopal Conference also ratified the sanctions and noted that the Holy Father has treated Cardinal Juan Luis Cipriani with exquisite pastoral charity and has proceeded by uniting justice and mercy. How about some justice and mercy for the victims? The cardinal expressed his surprise and sorrow and lamented that unproven facts are being taken as fact. Lopez Aliaga is scheduled to meet with Pope Leo, Francis' successor, on September 17th. That did happen. Cipriani arrived in Peru last January when the mayor of the capital awarded him the Order of Merit Grand Cross for his tireless pastoral, academic, and ecclesiastical work. According to his victim's statement to the newspaper El País, it was precisely this event that triggered the publication of the pedophilia case. The complainant, now 58, claimed that the abuse occurred at a student center in Lima during confession when he was between 16 and 17 years old. Thank you so much, Wave of Mutilation, for the $5 super chat. I appreciate that so much. I'm going to take a look at the chat right now, too, to keep the caffeine flowing. Yes, please. I started this stream so early this morning because I wanted to give people a chance to tune in, because I know if I schedule it too late in the day, then like people in other parts of the world, it's like the wee hours of the morning. So I wanted to start this early and get it knocked out so that people could tune in. And I started it so early I didn't actually have a chance to drink my coffee yet. So that is going to be the first thing that I do after I get done with the stream, and I'm very excited about it. So thank you. Thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Tina said, wow, Paulism. It makes a lot of sense. His misogyny is outstanding, perfect for instituting a patriarchal church. Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of really dogmatic and firm ideas, and there are some awesome videos that content creators on YouTube have made digging into Paul's theology and his like impact on Christianity and on Catholicism and everything. So if you're all interested in that, it's well worth digging into, just because I think the history of it all is really, really interesting. Wave of Mutilation said, Bishop Robert Barron. Wow, talk about nominative determinism. Yes. Russell Brand is a nutcase. Yes, Ohms, I agree. I think he's off his rocker. Wave of Mutilation said, did you know that the planet Venus draws a pentagram in the sky every 8 years? It's where the occult significance of the five-pointed star originates. I did not know that. Are you meaning like the configuration of the like celestial bodies at that point in time arranges itself in a way that you could trace like a five-pointed star? I'm assuming that's what you mean. That is interesting. Shia LaBeouf, just do it. Yes. Wave of Mutilation, you're coming in with the hot takes over and over. The Catholic Church has traditionally enjoyed a close relationship with the CIA and is said to have one of the best intel gathering operations on the planet. Yeah, that is 100% true, and something that in my early days of research, and when I was also searching for reason and searching for truth in my own life, and I started digging into the history of the Catholic Church and their relationship with other foreign nations. It's really, really interesting. And the Catholic Church's relationship with the intelligence community specifically, that is a deep rabbit hole. Wave of Mutilation again. If I was a power-hungry maniac, I would absolutely become a Catholic priest. You know, there are certain like fields, occupations, positions that you can get into where if you want to be just an unethical piece of shit and hurt people and take advantage of people and only be interested in advancing your own like self-interests, there are so many positions where I think, man, you could really be such a tyrant. I think being a teacher is a good one. I think being any type of clergy, especially if you're a man, more so than being a woman, because women in religion do not have as much power as men do. I think obviously any type of like civil, being in law enforcement. I mean, how many videos have we seen of law enforcement officers grossly abusing their position and their authority and everything, just being absolute money hungry, power hungry tyrants. It's, yep. Tina said, yes, thank you for starting so early. Otherwise, I can't ever catch you in Europe. I will definitely keep that in mind going forward. Truth be told, I'm a like morning bird anyway. Early, the early bird catches the worm. And I like to get up early and get things taken care of sooner rather than later. So, yeah, my phone is ringing again. And I'm using it as my webcam, which is why it's like kind of a problem. Okay. Oh, he said it's a retrograde motion thing. Honestly, it's easier to just look it up in regard to the pentagram Venus thing. There are some great graphics on YouTube. It is very cool. Ian said, gotta go now, but we'll probably watch the rest when I am free again. Thank you for the stream. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everybody who has tuned in so far for being here. I sincerely appreciate it. It really means a lot to know that, I care about these things and I'm bringing them forward because I think other people should know. And so the fact that there is an audience here to receive my words really does mean a lot, and I sincerely appreciate it. If I was just like shouting into a void all by myself, it would be a much more frustrating experience, I think. So I'm looking at my tabs here because I still have a lot of articles to get through, and I've been going for like 2 hours now, and I am probably only about a third of the way through. I am thinking about reading this one last article. We just read this article. I read this okay. And the next one was about the Legion of Christ. Maybe I'll conclude with this article today because I've been going for like 2 hours. My throat's starting to hurt a little bit. Some coffee would be really, really great. And maybe I will go live again tomorrow and do like a part 2 in the morning and start chipping through the rest of it. And we can just keep kind of working our way through it until we get through everything. I think that's what I'll probably do. I have a more stable internet connection right now than I did months previous. So I'm going to try to take advantage of that and go live a little bit more because I actually really do enjoy it. It's way less stressful than like writing and scripting and filming and editing and doing like an entire episode, which I am also doing that behind the scenes as well. But if I wasn't able to come on and come live and also talk about these things, and it would be probably months and months and months in between each of my like releases, each of my episodes that I publish. And that's just a long time. So I'm really happy to be able to do these live streams and to talk to you guys and everything. And since I am in a little bit more of a stable situation now, I think I'll just plan on going live again tomorrow, and we will pick up with the Legionaries of Christ building a holistic approach to safe environments, abuse prevention, responsiveness to victims, and ensuring priest wellness. I wanted to talk about that for reasons which I'm sure are abundantly clear if you know anything about the Legion of Christ and their history. But we'll go ahead and conclude that for today. I think we've been here long enough. People are already signing out. My throat's getting tired. I need caffeine, and I think it's just this is a good place to conclude things. So thank you again so much for being here. I sincerely appreciate it. Hopefully you'll be here with me again tomorrow. You can tune in for just a little bit. That would be awesome. I'd be so happy to see you. Thank you for being so supportive of my work. Reminders, you can connect with me across social media. All my socials are linked down below. If you prefer to read, I have a Substack where I have been publishing articles, and that's another great way to support my work. You can also buy me a coffee, send me a super chat, whatever. Just being here and giving the video a thumbs up and leaving a comment is honestly so incredibly helpful. And it means a lot. So I don't need your money, but the support is wonderful, and I sincerely appreciate it. And I sincerely appreciate every single person who showed up today. So that is where I am going to leave it for now. There are resources down in the description below, some mental health stuff if you are in need, or if you know someone who is in need. I've accumulated a list of global resources that should at least help a person get on the right track to accessing some support, because life is really, really challenging, made none easier by the things that we are talking about here. But you do not have to go at it alone or totally unequipped. So if you need help, please do reach out. So with that said, Tina, Ohms, Wave of Mutilation, thank you so much for all of your comments in the super chat. Ian, everybody else, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I will see you again for another stream very soon. And in the meantime, don't forget, Milite te bastardes carborundorum. Don't let the